What I want to tell you and show you is 40 years of university life, which I have, founding some universities in Austria and in Canada. One of the things which really motivates me is how do we get technology to support what is really important. And many things and many roads, and I think the opening session today was very helpful because it showed that there are not one path of learning. There's not one way of education. There's not one way of how to do things very well. So what I was interested and started looking at 15, 18 years ago was not the process of learning as such, to put this into the technology, but actually how do we work it back from the result? And the result is to build up knowledge. And if you want to understand what I'm saying is, I'm saying technology cannot cover many forms of learning. But the one thing which it can is cognitive learning. And that's the reason why I say microlearning is that which focuses on the cognitive aspect, on those propositional contents which people need to know in order to share a language, to share the terms, the concepts, some of that which is involved with it also in terms of the content. And so for me, what we have been working on in our research over the last 15 years is what would a solution be like which would be optimized just on this very, very narrow but very crucial element of learning which leads to cognitive knowledge. How do we optimize it for the brain? How do we optimize it for memory? So what would it be to have a Twitter for the brain so that anything which we say here would not be forgotten once we are out the door? How do we do it in terms of that we would have a Facebook for knowledge that we can share it with each other and assist each other? And that's exactly what we have been doing. And we looked at what is the real problem which people have in terms of helping them with memorizing, building up that knowledge, keeping the terms, keeping the insights, and having them present. And that is obviously, people have too little time. People know, we know since 1884 in Breslau, or in what is called Wroclaw today, Mr. Ebbinghaus made his experiments and he looked at what does it mean in terms of memorization, or what is the effects of memorization when it comes to syllabus, which makes sense or don't make sense. And he developed the forgetting curve or the learning curve and things like this. And if you look at, not on schools and universities, but also especially in corporations, people have too much to learn. There's too much information and there's a diminishing ROI. And so for the last 15 years, we have started off with first having a smart screensaver, so that when you come back to your computer, you do something with it. And then we had something which we would call a learning pacemaker, and then we did work with mobile phones and things like this. And then we developed the knowledge pulse with this idea of having a pacemaker not for the heart, not for the brain, but for the memory. And that is the way we got into microlearning and how we developed microlearning. Since 2005, we run conferences, academic conferences. But we have also developed products around this, and that's something which is very important. Because when we want to show people how to do things better, we don't want to go to the big Silicon Valley companies. We want to say, is there a platform which we can develop in Europe, which we can roll out, which scales around the world, just on this very, very humble issue of memorization, building up knowledge, sharing a knowledge base, a conceptual space, which we can actually then work in when we do projects, when we have to do tasks, when we are engaged in activities. And so what we have worked on, and what is really is our, let's say, scientific passion, is to do that in a very simple way so that people find time. Find time, well, they are waiting for a conference, where they are waiting for getting the cloak into the cloakroom or coming from a bus. And how the system actually can do something which you and I cannot do, which is repeat over and over again until you or I have memorized it sufficiently, and do it on an individual basis for 200 people in this room. And that's what we did. We developed a system of microlearning, which is so adaptive because of an algorithm, individually, so that everybody can actually get to the same level of knowledge. And that is not just a promise, but it's the delivery of what we try to do. And that is also within the context of prioritizing and keeping out the rhetoric and focusing actually on what is the propositional content of things. And so what we did then is we created a push technology so that people don't have to pull and don't have to find where am I actually now in this book and what did I leave out. That we developed something which is very playfully easy, which you can integrate in your work, which you can integrate in your life, which you can integrate when you're a student, when you can do it in such a way that the smart algorithm is really supporting you step by step in small micro activities. And do that on every platform. Some of you here in this room have tablets on their laps, some others have mobile phones in their hands, some have notebooks, and you have definitely a desktop computer in your office and at home. The system needs to run everywhere, and it must be a client-server solution so that you have a follow-me function and that you're basically having this tracking and that you can access all the contents in a very good way. And you need, and that's something which is very important, a rapid authoring interface for the people who create the content. But that is not good enough, because changing means that you flip actually from something which we have known for many, many years, flashcards, to something which is a knowledge card. And a knowledge card is where you have a question, where you have the prompt, where you have a proposition, but you have also the hint, so that you can link it with others. And when you have an answer, you want to really know what is the explanation. And this explanation can be then linked again in everything, including any kind of Wikipedia page, anything which is in the web, which is in the internet, in any other learning resources, and you can draw these learning resources into this knowledge card. But if you want to do that, and you want to engage users, you want to engage the learners, you want to also have a very simple way of giving feedback. And that works in two ways. It works for the user in terms of the motivation, because when you read a book, as you said in the intro, the book, you can scribble in it, but nobody answers to you. Here, with the knowledge card, you give a feedback, and you feel and you know that you matter. But for the content author, for the person who is the instructor, the responsible, this is an incredible addition, because all of a sudden that person knows, how does it actually read? Is it intelligible? Is it seen factually correct? Is it actually the right wording? And so what you have is you have living content. You can continuously improve on it. And then you have self-authoring. You have create your card within that card, in the knowledge card. And you can add. And if the two of us would sit here now, I could even take a picture and just have it in 3 seconds in the knowledge card, and then propose it to somebody who is the author or who is the instructor, and he or she can share it with others. And so you have not just living content, but you have updated content. And then you need a search function in terms of index as well as in terms of search. And that is important because knowledge is a web. I said before, our research goes very much into how to optimize in terms of cognitive learning. Now, repetition is one way. Interaction is the second way. But obviously, you need also contexts. You need not just the social context, but you need to know what are the other contexts. Where can I actually follow this? And so you have a self-paced exploratory learning, actually with that kind of entry in the knowledge cards. And that is something which we have done, and where the pedagogy of having a real good didactic approach in terms of what is in America called direct instruction, and we go into smart learning, where you can have actually, as a course instructor, choose between different kind of learning strategies. You have video completely integrated, and as many people talk about gamification, you can also invite somebody else here in terms of a knowledge match.
Question for me. So how do you define micro-learning? So I understand some of the technology you've described here. So, you know, we're seeing a greater trend towards people having lower attention spans. You know, the average attention span for a website's fallen from 12 seconds in 2000 to 8 seconds today. So do you have a time-based definition for micro-learning? Because I see what you're talking about here in terms of the job aids and the videos and that, but how do you define micro-learning vis-a-vis bite-sized learning, which might be, you know, a 5 to 10 minute video on a discrete piece? So how do you see those differentiations, and is there research that underpins that?
Yes, our concept of micro-learning is a sequence of learning steps which take about 3 minutes, and where the user, the learner, has the opportunity, if they are curious and if they have time, to explore and to move on to more. So the key issue there is to respect the time limitation of people, and the very concept of microlearning, also in an academic context, is to disengage learning from the stretch of time which is blocked. So 45 minutes, then it's learning. Here it is very much, because it has to do with the cognitive learning, very much focused on getting everybody onto the same level. It's very much used, for instance, in universities regarding continuing education, especially when it is professionally based education, where people have jobs and they come for weekends every 6 weeks, and then for a continuous preparation before or after. It's a very good example for that. Yep.
How do you measure your success at being a self-regulated learner with the content that's given to you, or maybe, as you said, you can also produce your own knowledge?
Yep.
So how do you measure it all? Is there any way of
measure
doing
in relationship to what?
To the achievement of any kind. So I have this opportunity now to constantly either repeat or gain certain knowledge, whatever that knowledge is. But how do I know what I've achieved or done? Is there anything that would give me any feedback?
As a user, as a learner, you get immediate feedback on terms of, did I answer this knowledge card correct or not correct? And then I can see how many cards I have in terms of the entire set of lessons. So from our research, we know that a lesson needs to be between 35 to 45 learning cards, because that is actually covering the propositional content in such a way that people can have a very good overview. For the measure for somebody who is an instructor is very clearly in terms of how many repetitions did somebody set as the level of in which you need to have the achievement. So you can change the learning strategy between 2 times learning, 3 times learning, 4 times learning, and 5 times learning. And how you can see how far did people progress in what period of time.
Okay. So, but it's more to a it's content. It's all about certain bits of content that you can monitor then.
I was yesterday at the Medical University in Graz, where the past president of the university is creating, for instance, in terms of histology, the very basic knowledge which you need to have as a student in that field. And that is absolutely essential for him, because with that kind of microlearning system, the assurance in terms of the quality of education at the very beginning, before the clinical studies, is much easier for the students to achieve, and because they have a very different kind of student population now, where people come with different kind of backgrounds, even linguistic backgrounds, and therefore the microlearning system is very helpful for them. And we are just publishing an academic paper on the effectivity of, and in comparison to, for instance, having a Moodle-based system and a microlearning-based system in terms of the introductory medical courses at that university.
Okay, thank you.